Sorry I've been gone quite a while. Things haven't been, well, normal lately. But I'm ready to talk more about this game, about the final level. I remember where we last left off. I'd been returned to the title screen after just completing Cream's stage. Back to that rusted logo with that rotten mountain landscape in the background. This time though, both Cream and Amy were the ones beside the logo. Cream's fur now a deep shade of purple, and Amy still there with those ghoulish features, fur a dull pink, that one eye still missing. And staring up at the logo, I saw none other than Sally Acorn popping up with a smile, giving the peace sign. I think I let out a small huff of amusement at this for a second. It was almost like the developer was still trying to show some level of innocence for the game, even despite everything that's already happened. Either way, I was extremely excited to get playing again. Knowing that I'd be playing as my favorite character really got me pumped and ready to go. So, once more, I hit enter, and the game cut to black with a sharp static sound. Red pixelated text faded on screen before the stage began. I read aloud, "Why do you keep putting us through this cycle? Leave, or be the sixth." I found it to be pretty interesting to say the least. More of the game communicating with the player, with some more cryptic messages. Things were definitely going to be getting more interesting, that's for sure. Especially when the stage faded into view. Sally was there, of course, standing in the beginning of Green Hill Zone. But there was no music. It was all quiet. Then the stage's title slid on screen. And, well, there wasn't a title. It was just an act before ... empty. After a moment, it slid off screen, and then I began running through the stage. I must say, I really was taking in the sights as I was moving through the stage. Sally's sprite looked pretty good. Pretty darn, well, identical to her SAT.am counterpart. The stage itself felt quite fascinating to me as well, almost like there was a story to tell. It looked like Green Hill, sure, but everything was rotten, dead, and decayed. Nothing really there. Grass, a mix of greens, yellows, and blacks. The trees, brown, well, outside of a couple of grays, I think. And the background looked identical to that mountain landscape from the title screen. I'd say one major, well, very obvious thing I noticed was the sky was a deep shade of bright red. I couldn't stay focused on it for long though, since obstacles began to appear. Spikes, springs, trying to avoid pitfalls, going through loops, sometimes even having a spin dash through those cliffs. I think it was like tunnels or something. And all the while I was collecting rings. It was like playing a twisted version of the original Sonic the Hedgehog. But I do remember furrowing my brow in confusion the longer I played. You see, other than the obstacles I had to get across, nothing really happened, which actually unnerved me. This place felt so empty, like there was no sign of life. I recall thinking that, something would happen soon, but nothing did. Not even Sonic was there to cause any torment. It felt weird to me, but nonetheless, I kept moving through the level. Soon, I eventually made it to the end of the stage, flipping the sign. However, instead of rushing off screen, Sally skidded to a halt and spun on her heel, facing left. My theory to this day is that maybe she was supposed to be looking at something, it made the most sense to me. I remember the sprite having an expression that looked to be one of concern. That's what it looked like anyway. But she stood there for a little while, just staring. And then suddenly she turned and rushed off screen, everything fading to black. The next act had quite the start. It began with a cutscene. The stage was completely different now, no longer resembling Green Hill Zone. Everything started with Sally running through a forest, or at least it looked like a forest to me. It was honestly quite hard to tell since, well, literally everything was just a black silhouette on a bright red background. Even Sally herself was just a shadow. Soon, as she ran, the title of the level slid on screen. Same as before, just an ellipsis, but Act 2. Soon the words slid off screen and Sally stopped. I had control over her again. I began moving once more, and I was really curious about this new location. I wasn't sure what on earth was going on or where I was, but one thing was for certain. The game was still just silent. No music, nothing. The place still felt so damn lifeless. I didn't have too much time to think about it since, well, more obstacles came up on my path. More pitfalls, spikes, some springs to help me get around. I remember needing to really focus as I moved through the stage. It was a bit difficult to see where everything was at times. I actually died at one point, falling into, well, spikes. And while it did suck being sent back to the beginning of the stage, the death did add more to the horror of the game. The moment I did die, the screen cut to black with a sharp static sound, before I then read out, "You don't get out that easy," in bright red pixelated text. This really added on to the story for me, so honestly, it made it feel better in a way to die, and easier to end up back at the beginning. And thankfully, I was able to get back to where I was pretty quickly. Though I gotta admit, I paid much more attention to the stage. I think I leaned in, honestly, just to ensure that I could really get a good look at my surroundings. Sometimes a lot of stuff was blending in too well. It was frustrating, but being careful allowed me to get past it. That was until this black shape came out of nowhere and just dashed at Sally. I remember jumping back in my seat with a "what the shit?" as the second the shape made contact with the chipmunk, the screen flashed red before going back to normal. Then it vanished. I looked back at the silhouette of Sally. Now she was crouched, the sprite seeming to rise and fall, as if, I guess, breathing heavily. After a few moments of her staying like that, she rose to her feet, and, well, I took control over her again. I remember thinking to myself as I continued through the level again, that little bitch, like, gone all this time and then suddenly striking? Jerk move on that hedgehog's part, but no less effective. That really got me engaged. The game brought back that startling aspect to the horror. This actually led me to feel a bit tense as I moved through the level, since I was not entirely sure what would happen next. Not much did happen though. Just like before, the place was empty, abandoned. And that's how it felt anyway. Though there were a few moments where I thought I saw a dark shape seeming to lurk in the background. Not too often, but it was there. After a little while of moving through the level, things began to change. less and less of those tall shadows that I believed to be trees were showing up, until eventually it was just clear. None of them there. I gotta admit, the scene in front of me looked pretty cool. A tad bit scary because of the idea, but it was really cool. Seeing Sally running across, just her silhouette among this bright red background, stars darting the sky here and there, it looked nice. Now, like I said, it was genuinely scary. It did unsettle me, and the reason is because I felt more exposed because I was practically out in the open. Soon, I ended up coming to a halt as a black wall was now towering over Sally. And at first I thought it was like a cliff. Maybe I could hit a spring and go up there, but there was no spring. None at all. I tried to do a spin dash. Maybe it was a chunk of land I could slice through. That wasn't the case either. I decided that it might be best for me to go left instead. Perhaps there was something I missed? I don't know. I wasn't sure. It didn't take long though before, well, I had to stop again. Because there was a pure black wall to the left as well. I went back to the right just in case if something changed there too. Nothing did. The wall was still there. I was pretty much boxed in. So I waited. I'm not sure how long I had Sally standing there for. I don't think it was that much time though. But I do know I was a little confused and honestly a little bit anxious because I was just practically standing there helplessly. Over time, something did happen though. Characters began fading into the background. If I had to compare it to anything, it looked almost as if they were coming in from, well, fog. One after the other they showed. Tails, Knuckles, and Eggman on the left. Amy and Cream to the right. They were just floating there in midair. Each of them looking so wrong. Sprites, not like their original selves. I remember feeling a little more confused as the scene played on. Music beginning to start up now. My bafflement only grew with every low note that played. I moved Sally around, but I couldn't go anywhere. That's when it dawned on me. The left and right walls were getting closer. Soon even the ceiling was showing. 3 angles of pure black just inching closer and closer with every second. I continued moving around, testing out whatever I could to see if there was anything at all that I could do. And there really wasn't. Every time I pushed against one of the walls, Sally would just enter a pushing animation, but it would still continue moving in her direction. There was honestly only one thing I could do, and that was to wait for the inevitable. The music slowing more and more over time, the further those walls began to close in. But one more thing did happen, immediately snapping my attention back into focus. The black silhouette of Sonic the Hedgehog suddenly burst from the ground, right behind Sally, and from what I can tell, he wrapped her in an embrace, pulling her in tight. And I do mean tight. Every so often, there was a sound of a loud snap, followed by shrieks of pain. I watched as it soon became clear that Sally's silhouette was moving aggressively, clearly struggling against Sonic's grasp, shrieking and hollering in, well, I guess terror and agony. The wall still inched closer and closer to the pair, and over time, the red background could no longer be seen. I could barely even make out the 2 characters. Next thing I knew, everything closed in, before ending with a sickening splat. my screen flashed a bright crimson as more of that red pixelated text appeared. But this time, the text seemed to be dripping blood, from what I could tell. And I read out, "Sonic, my love." And that scene went to play yet again, the one from the beginning, from the cartoon of Sonic going to kiss Sally. But just before they made contact, an image of Sally flashed on my screen, a loud shriek screeching through my speakers. This immediately sent me jumping back into my seat in shock. And man, was that image unsettling. It was a headshot of Sally facing the viewer in a style like that of, I'd say, a painting or digital art, if I had to compare it. Her head was tilted quizzically to the side, a small smile on her face. What made it so much worse, though, were her eyes. They were sewn shut, bleeding profusely, and it just, in combination with that smile, looked so wrong. It stayed like this for a little while, that distorted shriek through my speakers, the image on screen, before red static began to overtake it, and that Kefka-like laugh playing once again. Then, it cut away. I was taken to a new image, one depicting Angel Island, still floating, but now in this hellish landscape. The sky was a blood red, and everything surrounding the island were, well, nothing but spikes littered along the ground. It looked so wrong, off, like it just didn't belong there. I saw the faint outline of something faded in the center of the image, and as I looked at it, I began to realize it was Sally. She was crouched, her hands placed in a relaxed state on her thighs, and her eyes were still sewn shut, bleeding. But her expression was calm now, from what I can tell. I couldn't make out all the details on her since the image was translucent, see-through. And right in the center of her were the words "Game Over" in white pixelated text. I watched this scene for a little while, and eventually I tried to escape out of it, but it didn't work. Not at all. I had to completely shut down my computer just to get out of the game. When I did turn my computer back on, though, I found a random assortment of images on my desktop, each depicting the characters in varying states of decay. It was a nice touch, a bit over the top in my eyes, but considering everything that already happened in this game, a nice touch. I tried to remove the files because I just didn't want them there, but there was no luck. It didn't work. It really pissed me off. I tried to get my father to help me, but he didn't see them, apparently. He questioned what I was talking about, even when I pointed directly at the image. He didn't see it, supposedly. I tried to call Tom, but he didn't pick up. Not once, and I called him several times. Come to think of it, yeah, he hasn't called in quite a while either. Hasn't even shown up to school for days. I tried calling his parents at one point, but, well, they questioned me. They didn't ask, where Tom was. They asked who Tom was. I think I even asked my parents the same question to figure out what the heck was going on, and they too wondered who Tom was. Recently I've been having to talk to a doctor now. My parents are getting worried. I've been I've been acting a little bit like Tom lately. So I've been seeing the things he claims to see. I don't get it. I'm supposed to be getting put on medication for it soon, but I don't know. I just hope it works. Hopefully. 'Cause I've been getting really lightheaded a lot lately. And this blue blur keeps showing up at the corner of my vision. It drives me nuts. Well, that's the game I found, which I found it to be pretty interesting. Sorry, I need to go lie down now. I don't feel too well again.
Enjoyed that? Why not subscribe? There are more entertaining and frightening stories right here on this channel, just waiting to be read. So feel free to stick around. After all, there is more to come, and they're all unique to this location. And with every new story, every new twist, the quality only improves. So why not like, share, and subscribe? Because with your support, it only betters the content to enhance your experience.